Hello and welcome, I'm Alya Shandra and you're watching Head to Head with UATV. Today we're talking about the documentary called Putin's Hostages, Ukrainian Political Prisoners of the Kremlin. This film depicts phenomenon of at least 70 Ukrainians imprisoned on political motives in Russia. The film highlights 3 of these stories, those of Yevhen Panov, Pavlo, Hryb and Bekir, Dehermendzhi. It shows the impunity of Russian authorities which detain people, deprive them of basic human rights and generate fear as a factor in the battle with their opponents. To speak more about this film, we welcome to our studio today Alya Shandra, Editor-in-Chief of Euromaidan Press and producer of this film. Hello and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for the invitation.
It's a pleasure to have you here. So could you please tell us more about this movie and the structure?
Well, the idea behind the film is to shed light on the phenomenon of Russia's hostage-taking. Everybody in the West knows about the names of Alya Shandra and Sentsov, but a few people know that there are actually very many people, and their list is rising each day. So with this in mind, we decided to create this film to tell about the phenomenon of the victims that are seldom talked about in the international agenda. The film is based on interviews with the relatives of the political prisoners and also interviews with those who have been released, Artem Chigos and Hryb Panov, as well as activists who are working towards the release of Ukrainian political prisoners.
Oh, that's a lot of work. That's a lot of speakers also to interview.
Yes, well, it was a challenge to make the film fit into 40 minutes because we wanted it to be as accessible as possible to non-specialists. So we wanted to tell about why Russia is doing this, to show the reasons behind these seemingly absurd acts of taking innocent prisoners. So,
and what are the reasons then?
Well, we consider that the reasons are basically they're for propaganda purposes, to generate the image of the enemy that Russians would hate, because Russian propaganda depicts these innocent people as saboteurs, as spies, as terrorists.
Terrorists, yes.
Yes. So basically, it creates a very negative picture of a Ukrainian for the Russian public eye. But as well, of course, in Crimea, the hostage-taking is being used as a weapon against the ethnic minority, the Crimean Tatars, who are overwhelmingly pro-Ukrainian, who oppose the Russian occupation. Their imprisonment is a way to generate fear among them, and to tell them that if you stand up, if you raise your head, you will also be in prison.
So basically the documentary recounts the propaganda mechanism, right, and the actual goal of this show trials, so to say.
Yes, but as well it shows the human side of it, how the relatives of the prisoners are living without them and their emotions.
They're suffering.
Yes.
I believe that was a hard work and hard interviews, probably very emotional, and I would very much be looking forward to watching this documentary. Also, I do know that we have approximately 70 Ukrainians who are recognized as political prisoners illegally being held. But so approximately 25 of them are being held illegally in Russia and 40 in occupied Crimea. Why did you decide to build your movie specifically on 3 stories of Yevhen Panov, Pavlo, Hryb and Bekir, Dehermendzhi?
Well, one of them is a Crimean Tatar, and of course we wanted the Crimean Tatars, who are a large part of these prisoners, to have their voice.
Constantly being persecuted,
Yes. One is a Ukrainian who was basically kidnapped and tortured into making a confession when he was entering Crimea. So we wanted to show Crimea as a peninsula of impunity. And one is a Ukrainian that was kidnapped in Belarus. So he is not related to Crimea, but it shows that the Russian special services are working abroad also to take hostages. So with this we wanted to cover the whole spectrum of types of hostage-taking. But also, we wanted the relatives of these prisoners to be present in order to take their take their interview face-to-face, so they would share their emotions and thoughts about their relatives being kidnapped. And
let's speak about relatives a little bit later. I do want our audience to understand a little bit more what we're talking about, and we do have this short clip from the trailer, so let's watch.
They knew that they have any proofs, any evidence against me. That's why they tortured me. They put a bag on my head, trying to suffocate me, beat me again and again.
So that was Hennady Afanasyev. He is being released from the Russian prison, luckily, but he was also arrested as Sentsov for allegedly planning terrorist acts and participating in the same terrorist group as Sentsov, right? So you interviewed a lot of people, a lot of friends and relatives of these ones who are being illegally held in Russia and occupied Crimea. Could you tell us what were the hardest moments?
Let me tell you maybe first about who was actually involved in the interviews.
Yeah.
The film was made by Polish filmmakers, Bożydar Pajak, who's a Polish filmmaker, and Piotr Malinowski, a Polish journalist who had the idea to make this film. So they were the ones doing the interviews. I was more into production.
An international team.
Yes, it was a very international team, and the film is also funded by the British Embassy to Ukraine, for which we are very grateful for their financial support.
Sure.
So I guess, well, I was present at some of the interviews, for instance, with Igor Hryb, who is the father of Pavlo Hryb, who was answering about his son's room, which he doesn't enter because everything there is waiting for Pavlo. About the things that Pavlo lost when he was, what he was deprived of when Russia took him into prison. Of course, these moments are the hardest for the relatives to talk about, and they are the most emotional ones, and they are the ones that will make the largest impact on the international audience.
That is true. Let's just remind the audience that Pavlo Hryb is just 20 years old, and he was lured to Belarus and then arrested by Russian security forces in Belarus, and then somehow they moved him to Russia in a Russian prison cell.
Yes.
And he's being accused in planning terrorist
They
attack.
moved him 1,000 kilometers away, and despite Pavlo having a very serious illness, they are
Yes.
depriving him of the appropriate medical care, and this is actually a state of medical emergency that Russia is ignoring altogether.
He's basically on the edge between
Yes.
life and death, and nobody pays attention, unfortunately, to this. I do know that the Ukrainian Commissioner of Human Rights, she is calling on this UN Committee on Torture to get involved into this process and just, I don't know, say a word about this condemnation of this Russia's actions. Could you please tell us if there is a footage of these political prisoners before they were detained? So basically from this everyday real life that they used to have before that horrible
We don't
day
have footage, but we do have photos. We have photos, we have stories that the relatives shared. We do have footage of the places where they live, because our crew visited Enerhodar, which is the home of Yevhen Panov. So in his flat where Yevhen lived, his relatives shared the stories.
So you premiered this movie a month ago. Could you tell us?
The premiere was held at a session in Pace on 23rd of January, where in Strasbourg, where a resolution on Russia's aggressive actions in the Azov Sea was being reviewed and
adopted.
And adopted, yes. So part of this resolution, of course, it focused on the fates of the 24 Ukrainian sailors that were taken as prisoners of war. by Russia in November 2018. So this film, it was a good accent to show that Russia's hostage-taking with the sailors, it's only a continuation of a general tendency that started from 2014. And unfortunately, if nothing is done against these actions, that this list will only grow.
Who was among the audience of this film?
This premiere was visited by diplomats and members of delegates to the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, as well as journalists.
Did they share their feedback about the movie?
Well, unfortunately, we didn't have, it was a very short event and we had to move on quickly afterwards. But I was told afterwards that it did make an emotional impact that we were aiming for. And this is...
Maybe it helped to adopt this resolution?
Maybe it helped this resolution, yes.
Could you tell us about your aspirations and expectations from this movie? Well,
I think it's a wonderful movie to show before any political negotiations about international help for these prisoners is made, because in my opinion, the number 70 Ukrainian political prisoners, it doesn't make the emotional impact that is needed for real political actions. For instance, with Alya Shandra, of course, everybody is concerned about his fate because they know about him. And this film, it aimed to make these 70 political prisoners a bit closer to international audiences and politicians and make them understand that this really is happening next to them. So I think I would want this film to be shown anywhere where the topic of Ukrainian political prisoners is raised. I think it's a wonderful preamble to get down to real negotiations about what can be done to help them.
I fully agree to that. And the last question, just because we're running out of time, when this movie is to be released in Ukrainian movie theaters and maybe abroad? You mentioned you would like to screen it abroad.
I don't think that it will go in Ukrainian movie theaters, but we do have plans for screening at a TV station. It's too early to reveal the plans, but we do.
But this is national television?
National television, yes.
Okay. And what about plans to distribute the movie abroad?
Well, we are currently searching for partners who can help us with that. We have some negotiations are underway, but it would be extremely helpful if anybody that has contacts to international television or cable networks to reach out to us. You can find our contacts at the Facebook page, Putin's Hostages, and tell us about
contact you. Well,
contact me.
Hopefully, somebody important is watching this interview right now.
Hopefully.
So far, I thank you for your interesting comments and thank you for your contribution into, well, depicting all this process. This is really important for all of us, that that people care, that people want to tell other people, to share this information and make them more aware of things happening in Ukraine and in Russia. Thank you so much for being a guest today in our studio. That was Alya Shandra, editor-in-chief of Euromaidan Press and producer of the documentary Putin's Hostages, Ukrainian Political Prisoners of the Kremlin. Thank you for watching Head to Head. I'm Alya Shandra. Goodbye.